You are now listening to
Chakras and Shotguns.
Welcome to Chakras and Shotguns, the podcast that guides you on a journey of spiritual development and personal preparedness. I'm Mik, a marketer, shamanic healer, and prepper.
And I'm Jen, a former lawyer, yogi, and my big three in astrology, fun fact, are all air signs. So I feel like for the past few years, everybody is saying, do you meditate? Do you meditate? Do you have a meditation practice? Do you have Insight Timer? Do you have the mindfulness app? And there's a million articles about just start out 5 minutes a day and, the practice of meditation. And you may even have a meditation practice, which is fantastic. But you also may have run into some issues that have you talking yourself out of sitting down and meditating regularly. Today on our episode, we're digging into those challenges and hopefully giving you some tips and a different perspective on what it really means to practice meditation.
Yes, but before we jump into that, we do want to remind you guys to sign up for our mailing list if you haven't already. We have a newsletter that comes out every couple of weeks, and if you're on our mailing list, you'll get all of our news first, including promotions and sales on merch. So go to chakrasandshotguns.com and sign up today. You can even click the link at the bottom of your podcast description on your podcasting app.
All right, you ready to get into some breath work?
Let's do it.
So I am in week 2 of yoga teacher training. I also, like I said at the top of the show, I am an Aquarius sun and a Gemini moon and rising. So there's a lot of air and I often need to ground. I'm often kind of floating around somewhere. So I thought it would be good to introduce this 3-part breathing technique that I learned in yoga teacher training, which is grounding energy, which, we probably all need. So let's go ahead and get started. So find a comfortable seat. You can always lay down. You can butterfly your legs out if you're laying down. Maybe put one hand on your belly, one hand on your heart. And just notice your natural breath. Okay, let's inhale in through your nose. First filling your belly, then your rib cage. Keep inhaling, filling your chest full of air. Just hold that at the top. And as you exhale, only let out that first third of air from your chest. Hold. Now exhale the breath from your ribcage. Hold. And then exhale all of your breath out of your belly, completely emptying your body of air. Let's do that again. Inhaling in through your nose. First filling your belly, then your rib cage, filling your chest last, holding at the top. Exhaling out through your mouth, the breath in your chest, then your rib cage, holding, then exhaling the breath out of your belly, completely emptying your breath. Last one we're going to do together. Inhaling in through your nose, filling your belly, then your rib cage, finally your chest, holding at the top. This time through your nose, exhaling that first third out of your chest, hold. Exhaling out through your rib cage, hold. And then exhaling the last bit of air from your belly. So now just naturally breathe in and out through your nose. Feeling yourself grounding to the earth. Thoughts may come up. You can observe them and let them just pass you by. Giving yourself gratitude for finding this moment to root down into the earth and just finding some time to be still and to be present. All right. We're here for a good time, not a long time. Let's get into the show.
All right. Thanks, Jen. Let's talk about some meditation. Get our So, almost 2 years ago, can you believe it's been that long?
Wow.
We had an episode 2 where we talked about meditation. And, we were active meditators back then for sure. But I think just in the evolution in the last 2 years, we were like leaps and bounds beyond what we were before when it comes to our meditation practice, I'd say.
Okay.
And I think as we, went about that process of deepening our practice, there were some obstacles that we have had to overcome. So I think in this episode, we really want to dive into what are some of those challenges, those common challenges that others may face as well, that comes when you're trying to hit that next level of meditation.
Yes. So I feel like I had a lot of stops and starts to having a meditation practice. And then spiritual journey happens and it's like, no, like, let's really dive into it. I felt like before then I was kind of like, what am I doing this for? What's the point? That sounds bad, but it was just like people were just telling me to be still for like 5 minutes a day. And I was like, I got shit to do.
I hear you.
So
I didn't get the benefits of it as well early on. I think it took me a while to like really start to figure out why it was so important,
I also remember, I think it was at the beginning of the pandemic and I was feeling a lot of anxiety and we sat down to do a meditation. I don't know if you remember this. We sat down to do a meditation like with the Peloton app and I was just like, I feel worse. Like I feel like I had more anxiety after I got out of that. So then I was kind of like, what was the point of this? What was the point of this? Now, I think in hindsight, it was kind of uncovering and making me face some things so I could release some things.
For sure.
But it was very uncomfortable for me emotionally.
Yeah.
So I think I wasn't really about it. But once the spiritual journey really kicked off, I think I came at it from a completely different angle. But then I ran into some of these challenges. So we decided to do 3 common challenges that we feel like people run into when they're building a meditation practice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's get into it.
So challenge number 1, every time you sit down to meditate, you fall asleep. So this was definitely me when I first started meditating, like regularly. Mind you, I was newly pregnant with our youngest daughter and pregnant ladies be sleepy. They tired,
Absolutely.
I love a nappy nap. I've always loved a nap, honestly. So and then being pregnant, just like, I'm going to lay down.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm laughing because I definitely remember there were times when you were like, hey, baby, can you watch our oldest? I'm going to go meditate for 20 minutes. And I look at the clock and it'd be well past 20 minutes. And I'm like, let me go peek in on it real quick. And you'd be knocked out. So
yeah. And while nap time is cool, I would get frustrated because I wanted that deep, meditative, transcendental experience. And I remember being really frustrated because I did also feel like I wasn't really doing either. Like I would come out of meditating or I would wake up and I'd be like, but I didn't get good nap time. I didn't feel like I knocked out, but I also wasn't completely present and conscious to say that I was meditating. And so I had a reading with Melanie Esperon, our favorite medium. And I was like, I'm having this issue. Like I keep falling asleep in this meditation. And she was like, don't beat yourself up about that because sleep is the deepest form of meditation. And so when you think about it from a spiritual standpoint and you take the knowledge that dreams are not just dreams, that when we're dreaming, we may be traveling, we're receiving messages. And so that's sometimes where you might feel like you might have slept and had a lot of dreams and you woke up and you're like, I'm still tired because your brain was still really active. And so that really changed my perspective on it. And it really made me start rethinking and stop beating myself up about quote unquote falling asleep during meditation. Because was I asleep?
Yeah. I've talked before about having the gift of clairvoyance, and honestly, I still don't have a full handle on how to like control it. It's not something I can like turn on, but when it is most prevalent is in those periods between waking and being asleep, or like if you kind of get woken up in the middle of the night but you're not fully awake. Like it's in those moments where I like really get a lot of downloads and visions that are like visual in nature. So let's talk a little bit about the science of that, right? So what you're experiencing when you're sleeping, meditating, is a shift in brain waves, right? These brain waves, they are basically like electrical patterns that are generated by the neurons in our brain. And there's different types, and they all are characterized by their frequency and amplitude. So if you think about waves, like how often the wave pattern occurs is the frequency, and then the height and the depth of the waves is the amplitude.
Come on. Scientists over here. Bill Nye the Science Guy.
So starting first with delta waves, they have a frequency of around 1 to 4 hertz. That's the lowest frequency and highest amplitude. And they are associated with deep sleep and unconsciousness.
Knocked out.
Done. See? That's where you was at. You was living in the delta.
You don't know where I was living, okay?
Next, we have theta waves. So these are a slightly higher frequency. So think 4 to 7 hertz. They have a lower amplitude than delta, and they are associated with that light sleep, relaxation, and that creativity. So this is where you want to be. That's the sweet spot for meditation. Then moving on to alpha waves. They have a frequency of 8 to 12 hertz and are associated with relaxed wakefulness and a calm meditative state. So this is like not the deepest form of meditation. It's like that next level up kind of meditation that you can be in. And then beta waves have an even higher frequency. They're 12 to 30 hertz and lower amplitude, and are associated with alertness, concentration, and focus. Gamma waves have the highest frequency, so 30 to 100 hertz, and are associated with high-level cognitive processing, including perception, attention, and memory.
Look, you talking about all these waves. Now, look, you know, when we first started talking, we bonded over Jeopardy. So, nerd alert. Anyways, when I first heard about the brain waves and specifically what that looks like in meditation, it clicked for me that what I felt was I was experiencing something in between delta and theta. And that's why I felt like I wasn't asleep.
Yeah.
But I wasn't conscious, like, you know, alert. I wasn't alert either. I was somewhere in between. And it was this fluctuation. And so if we're talking about spirituality, theta waves are really where the magic happens. As Mik said, that's the sweet spot, right? You may experience your clairs, and Mik talked about his gift of clairvoyance. You might have clairaudience, which I always like to say this because this is something that I felt like we had to figure out on our own, was that it might not be somebody saying, Mik, go buy a lottery ticket right now. The numbers are 27, 16, 5, 37, and 4. Like nobody's like, you might not, I was about to say nobody. Let me not do that. You might not hear it that way. It's almost like, sometimes it's almost like your inner voice, if you have an inner voice, because you know, some people don't have it.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about that. But that inner voice, maybe the voice that you hear when you're reading something, if you have that, there's a whole study and thing about that some people don't have that, but it might pop up like that for you. It might be a clear knowing, you're in a meditation and you're like, I need to go apply for that job.
Side note, I'm fascinated by people who do not have an inner voice. So
we weren't going to talk about that.
Send me a DM on Chakras and Shotguns and we'll talk some more. Just got my own independent research over here I'm trying to do.
You really are like sliding my DMs to talk about your lack of inner voice.
That's what gets me going,
You're so goofy. Anyway. You may see colors or hear sounds or experience. There's also clairtangency, which is like the feeling of things, which I can experience sometimes. So I might feel different sensations on different sides of my body, in my hands. I might feel like a presence. So that's what you're trying to get to. That's what you're working towards, is getting to that theta wave state. And this is also a really powerful state for manifestation, with the thinking that the deeper relaxation that you have, and you almost go not blank, but you're not running through the to-do list, the day-to-day. And I describe it as like a sinking in. Like I feel like myself like really being seated within myself. Like it's almost like I hypnotize myself, if that makes sense. Where, when you see them on TV and they would snap and the people would just kind of sink and like kind of like fall in. That's what it feels like to me, where I'm like, oh, and the more you do it, the more you'll be aware of that sensation. Like, oh, this is different. You see how that's different?
Yeah, I thought about the movie Inception, where they were like going deeper and deeper into the dreams. It's almost like that's what's happening. Like to see those ideas, those manifestations that you want to achieve, you have to get to like that deep level to be able to plant that seed. So.
Don't get stuck though. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, the deeper relaxation that you're experiencing, the more you have the ability to manifest with more intensity and more clarity. Theta waves are also where you experience dreams. Remember when you're dreaming, you're not in deep REM, which is the delta waves. So that's where you're experiencing dreams. And I'm bringing this back up because from a spiritual standpoint, especially when you're exploring your spiritual gifts, you're like, I just made that up, child. That was a whole dream. And so I think it's a really good lesson in trusting your instincts and your intuition, exploring what that feels like for you. Because when you're just like, if you were going to sit down and write a story, what that feels like versus like someone telling you a story. So someone telling you something. And so really exploring that, and having a journal is an absolute must at all times whenever you are meditating, because you never know what's going to come up. You want to write it down, and you might come back and look at it 6 months from now and be like, that's a bunch of gobbledygook. And maybe it was, and maybe it'll make sense later. Maybe it won't, but you're on the record. I don't know. Be your own court reporter. Finally, the last thing I'll say about theta waves is, if you have not tried it out, and this is often not found at yoga studios regularly, like a regular part of their class lineup, is yoga nidra, which is sleep for the yogis. And it's essentially a guided meditation to get you to a theta wave state. They tested this out on war veterans, and it dramatically improved their PTSD symptoms. It's also really good for people who are insomniacs or have a really hard time sleeping. They say that 1 hour of yoga nidra is equivalent to 6 hours of sleep. So I've done it in my yoga teacher training. It was phenomenal. And I thought maybe I would feel like that when you come out of it and you're just kind of like a little groggy or whatever. I was like, no, let's get the day going. And I was tired before going into it. So that's a really, really cool type of yoga that I want to explore more. And I actually am going to record a yoga nidra session, and we're going to put that up on Patreon Shameless plug. So go to patreon.com/chakras and shotguns if you want access to that yoga nidra session with me.
Yep. And that link will also be in our show notes for our Patreon. So check that out as well. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the second challenge that we wanted to highlight. So you probably have heard this term before when, exploring the insight timers and the 10% happier and all of these apps that are out there. It's called monkey mind. And I can't prove it. But something about that term just feels a little racist to me. I don't know.
But then sometimes do you ever feel like racism prevents me from talking about monkeys? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I have to hate all terms related to monkeys because of racism.
Yeah, you're like, I remember we were looking at some sheets for the kids. And you're like, I'm not getting them monkey sheets.
They had a bunch of like zoo animals. I was like, there's monkeys on there. I'm not sending my baby to school with this.
Anyway, I'm kidding about the term monkey mind, but the sentiment still stands with regard to the other things we just discussed. But with regard to monkey mind, basically, that term is all about like your mind jumping all over the place. It is, you have this inability to focus when you try to get into meditation, whether it's, simple meditation where you're just trying to focus on your breath and you start thinking about your grocery list or did I take the trash out or whatever, right?
Taxes.
Oh man. It's that time right now. And I'm not, you bringing in some anxiety for me right now.
Sorry.
I got to get that done. Anyway, so I actually, in learning more about meditation over the last couple of years, there was actually this video I saw, and the speaker was talking about meditation and like, your mind wandering. And so he had everybody in the audience do a very simple meditation. They were just focusing on their breath, inhale, exhale, feeling the breath through their nose, through the lungs, et cetera, et cetera. And he was just wanting them to solely focus on that sensation. And then at the end of it, he said, okay, now how many folks had their mind wander? And pretty much everyone raised their hand. And he said, how many of you guys were able to bring yourself back though, every time you had a thought that took you away from the focus of your breath? And he basically said that act of coming back is where the magic is. That's where you're actually training yourself to be in a deeper meditative state. He said, he talked about how things grabbing our attention constantly is how we are in our waking state, and our brain kind of adapts to that. And he was saying that in meditation, though, you want to try like the opposite, right? Of like grabbing your attention back away from what's trying to take you away, right? And so like it's almost like the inverse muscle that you're trying to exercise, right? So the more reps that you get at pulling your attention back to yourself or to whatever it is you want to focus on, the easier and more strong you'll be when it comes to trying to get into that meditative state. So look at the monkey mind as like a blessing. It's an opportunity for you to get a rep in of pulling yourself back in. And the more times you do it, don't get frustrated that you keep having to do it. Take it as an opportunity, right? My mind's being bounced around. I'm pulling it back. I'm pulling it back. I'm pulling it back. It's like doing push-ups. Every one you do, the easier the next one gets. So,
and I think so many people start a meditation practice, and if they're anything like me, they beat themselves up for like, you are not supposed to be thinking about what time your car needs to be into the shop next week. You're supposed to be meditating, and like how much we'll be unkind to ourselves about the things and the thoughts that pop up. And like, why can't I do this better? Why can't I just sit here?
Yes. Particularly high achievers like you and I.
Yeah.
And so I've adopted the practice of giving myself and my mind gratitude for taking me away, because it's another chance for me to come back.
Okay. Flip that on his head, man. Come on.
So that's my tip to you guys out there. Don't beat yourself up if you're struggling to stay focused. It's like the number one thing I probably hear from people. I can't stay focused. I can't stay focused. It's an opportunity.
And if you want some other helpful tools. And they're not crutches. They really are like meditative tools to help you focus, and maybe just sitting is not the best for you.
Mm-hmm.
You can get creative. Our last episode we talked about candles and candle magic, and you can use the flame as your focus. That is a very real meditative practice.
Mm-hmm.
You can also use mala bracelets. They're the little bracelets that, I don't know. Why did I say little? I'm so Southern. You know, them little bracelets, the little bracelets with the crystals on them, but they're with the round beads, similar to like a rosary, which, you know, making that Christian connection of like, you know, using the beads on the rosary in prayer, using the mala beads on a bracelet to help you focus, and just moving one bead at a time and just kind of focusing on that action so you can quiet those thoughts. But when those thoughts do come up, just returning back to the practice.
Absolutely. I am a big fan of the beads. My shamanism mentor, who we've had on the show, Kira Buckley, she gifted me a mala that is made of like copper beads. And the first time I sat down and meditated with those things and just kind of counted, I got into such a deep meditation. So I really, really like it, you know, using those. I'm also a fan of using crystals. I have a specific crystal that anytime I feel like I'm not being grounded, I'll meditate with that. And it's very calming for me. I also recommend eye masks, noise canceling headphones, using those to kind of block out any sensory information that may be trying to get in while you're meditating. So big fan of those as well.
Nice. Okay. The last challenge of this episode. You may have others. Let us know. Number 3, my neck, my back. I can't sit that long like that. No, seriously.
Okay, Kaya.
You tell yourself that you're not good at meditating because it hurts. It hurts in your body. You may have tight hips, tight hamstrings like me, a knee injury. So sitting cross-legged for a long time or kneeling on your knees is just like a no-go. I personally find it hard to sit super straight and tall for a long time. Like my shoulders just naturally want to curve. My back kind of wants to collapse. And so then what I would do is I would lie down, and then we back at the top of the show. I'm in challenge number 1. I done fell asleep. So what are you to do?
So what's interesting about this, I learned this recently. This actually is the history of yoga, right? We touched on this a little bit in episode 39, but yoga started out with the philosophy way before the physical practice was even developed. And the reason why the physical practice actually was developed is because they were having a hard time sitting in meditation. Their back was hurting. And so they were like, well, we got to do something. We got to strengthen the body in a variety of ways so that we can sit longer in meditation. So, you know, the stronger your body, the more flexible you are, the longer you can kind of sit in these different poses, kneeling, sitting with your legs crossed, etc., to meditate more. So one type of yoga that specifically focuses on strengthening the muscles needed for meditation is called yin yoga. And we spoke on it briefly before. It's a slow practice where you're not going to do a lot of sweating. You're either sitting or lying down the whole class, and you're working on basically getting your muscles to disengage. The poses are held longer. You do a lot fewer poses, maybe only 5 to 6 poses in a 1-hour class. And again, it's really just about trying to, you know, target those muscles that are needed to sit down in meditation.
Yeah, that one's a cool one. I've done a class before, and you're sitting in a pose 3 to 5 minutes on one side, and then you got to do the other side. And so it can be uncomfortable, but what you're learning is when those muscles disengage and they're stretching, there are opposite muscles that are strengthening at the same time. So it's a more passive type of strengthening practice. So it's really, really cool. I think if you've seen other types of yoga and maybe you felt like it was a lot, or you have wrist, shoulder, knee injuries, I think this one is going to be a little bit more accessible. Well, we said we was doing 3, y'all, so that's it. But hopefully this episode gave you some encouragement to keep going on your meditation journey, and it gave you a different way to look at the things that you tell yourself to skip meditating. We're all about a reframe here, y'all. So let's reframe. Go sit down somewhere. Sit up against a wall if your back hurt like mine. And put an eye mask on, some headphones, get some binaural beats, and get to meditating. Tell us what happens. Tell us what you see, what you hear, what you feel.
Yes, indeed.
And tell Mik, what did you want them to tell you?
DM me if you do not have an internal voice. I'm serious about this, y'all. Doing some independent research.
Oh my gosh.
Write a book about it. All right, before we go, guys, though, we do want to remind you one more time, check out chakrasandshotguns.com and sign up for our newsletter. Next one's coming out soon.
And finally, if you're loving the show, because we know you are, please subscribe and give us 5 stars wherever you listen.
Namaste.